The small cargo ship drifted in the cold dark of space, its metal skin shining faintly under the light of distant stars. Inside, Captain Elias sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes heavy from hours of scanning empty space. He had been running trade routes for years, carrying small shipments between mining colonies and research stations. Life was quiet, almost too quiet, and he often wondered if he would ever see something truly strange. That night, he did. A faint blip appeared on his radar. At first, he thought it was space debris, maybe a broken satellite or a drifting rock. But the shape was wrong. It was moving slowly. Like a wounded animal limping through the void, he adjusted the sensors, and the blurry image became clear. It was a small alien shuttle, battered and cracked. One engine was gone. The other flickered weakly through the wide front glass. He saw movement, a figure holding something close. His heart beat faster. He zoomed in the image. The figure was tall and slender, with skin that glowed faint silver under the emergency lights. Her large, dark eyes were fixed on something beyond him. She clutched two small shapes in her arms. Children. Both looked weak, their eyes half closed. A soft crackle came from the comms, followed by a trembling voice. "Please, take us, or we will die." The voice was feminine, tired, but full of urgency. Elias sat frozen, his mind racing. This was not a normal rescue. Her tone carried something else: fear, desperation, and a strange choice of words. Why must he take her? Why not ask for medical aid or a tow to the nearest station? And why mention death in such a final way? He pressed the come button. "This is Captain Elias. Identify yourself for a moment." There was only static. Then the voice returned. Soft and shaking, "I am Lyra of the Endari. My husband is dead. My ship is failing. And by our law, I must take a new husband, or my children will be taken from me." Elias blinked. The words felt unreal. This was no ordinary passenger begging for rescue. This was a plea for a bond. A vow, in the middle of space, from a stranger he had never met. His instincts told him to stay away, for all he knew. This could be a trap, a trick used by pirates or bounty hunters. But there was something in her voice, something that pulled at the part of him that had been lonely for far too long. He checked the scanner again. No other ships in range. But the shuttle's life support was failing fast. Oxygen levels dropping by the minute. "Why me?" asked, his voice low. There was a pause. Then she said, "Because you are human, and they will not expect me to hide with one of you. Please, open your airlock, or watch us die." Elise's fingers hovered over the controls. If this was a trap, opening the airlock could mean his death. If it wasn't, refusing would mean the death of a mother and two children. He cursed under his breath. His ships. Warning light began to blink. The shuttle was now dangerously close to total power failure. He hit the override, unlocking the docking port. A dull thud echoed through the hull as the alien shuttle connected. Cold air hissed as the doors opened. The woman stepped inside, tall and graceful even in her weakness. Her silver skin shimmered faintly, and her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for danger. The two children clung to her legs, their small hands gripping her clothing. She looked at Elias, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. You may have just saved 3 lives." Elias nodded slowly, unsure if he had saved them or doomed himself. Elias guided the woman and her children to the passenger cabin, the soft hum of the ship's engines filling the silence. The alien woman moved slowly, her silver skin catching the dim light, her long white hair flowing over her shoulders. The two children stayed close to her, their small feet making barely a sound on the metal floor. Elias noticed they were thin, too thin, as if they hadn't eaten properly in days. He poured warm water into 3 cups and handed them over. The children drank quickly, their large eyes watching him with a mix of fear and curiosity. The woman took a slow sip before speaking, her voice calmer now, but still heavy with sadness. "My name is Lyra of the Andari," she said. "My home is gone." Elias leaned forward. "What happened?" he asked. Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor. "My husband was a soldier. He fought in the border wars, protecting our people from invaders," she began. "One night, he did not return. The next morning, the sky was filled with fire, and the enemy came." Her words painted an image of a city under siege, buildings crumbling, ships falling from the sky. She told him how she ran, holding her children, hiding in the ruins, while soldiers searched for survivors. When the attack ended, her world was silent, too silent, and she knew her husband would never come back. "In our culture," Lyra continued, "a widow must take a new husband within 9 moons, or her children are claimed by the state." Elias frowned. "That's harsh." Lyra nodded, her eyes glistening. "They say it is to protect the young, but it is a way to control the women." She explained that she had refused the suitors chosen for her wealthy men, tied to the same corrupt leaders who started the war. Instead, she took her children and fled in a small shuttle, hoping to find a place far from Andari space, but someone had followed her. She lowered her voice. "They are not after me. They are after what my husband left behind." Elias's curiosity sharpened. "What did he leave?" Lyra hesitated, glancing at her children as if weighing the danger of her words. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small crystal. No bigger than a thumb, glowing faintly blue. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "This," she whispered, "is a key." Elias studied it. "A key to what?" Her voice dropped even lower. "To the heart of the Empire. To its secrets. To the truth of the war." She told him that her husband had been more than a soldier. He had been part of a hidden resistance. The crystal contained data, stolen from the Empire's inner command, proof of crimes so terrible it could turn entire planets against them. But to deliver it, someone had to survive the hunt. Her husband died protecting it, passing it to her with his final breath. Lyra's hands trembled as she put the crystal back in her bag. "I cannot hide among my own people," she said. "They will search every colony, but they will not search the worlds of humans." Elias understood now why she had begged to be his wife. In the Empire's eyes, she would vanish under human protection. It was a dangerous plan, one that put his own life in the crosshairs. But something in her voice, in the way she held her children, made it hard to walk away before he could answer. A sharp beeping cut through the cabin. The ship's sensors picked up multiple contacts, approaching fast. Elias's stomach tightened. "How did they find us?" he muttered. Lyra's face went pale. "They never stopped looking," she said. "We must run." The children clung to her as the beeping grew louder through the cockpit window. Elias saw dark shapes sliding out of the void, sleek ships with red markings on their hulls, bounty hunters. Lyra's voice shook. "If they take us, they will take the crystal, and no one will ever know the truth." Elias's mind raced. He could throw them out now and save himself, or he could run, risking his ship, his freedom, and maybe his life. His hand hovered over the jump controls. One look at the children decided it. He slammed the button, and the stars stretched into lines as the ship leaped into hyperspace. Lyra closed her eyes and held her children close. "You are our last hope now, Captain," she said softly. Elias didn't answer, because deep down, he feared she might be right. The ship shook as it came out of hyperspace. Elias gripped the controls, his eyes scanning the black space around them. For a moment, everything looked calm, just empty stars and the cold glow of distant planets. But calm in space never lasted. Long Lyra stood behind him, holding her children close. Her silver skin looked pale under the dim lights. "Are we safe?" she asked, her voice tight. Elias didn't answer right away. He knew better than to promise safety. The sensors flickered. A faint signal appeared, then another. He zoomed in and cursed under his breath. "They're tracking us," he said. Even after a hyperspace jump, Lyra's hands tightened around her children. They will not stop. They never stop. Elias turned toward her. How? How can they still follow? Lyra hesitated. They have something. A hunter's code. It locks onto the crystal's energy. Elias slammed a button on the console, shutting down every non-essential system. If the crystal was giving off a signal, he needed to hide. "Give it to me," he said, holding out his hand. Lyra hesitated, but then placed the small glowing crystal in his palm. Its light pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in the dark. He placed it inside a light-lined storage box from the cargo bay, sealing it with a click. The light vanished. "Now, maybe. We bought ourselves a little time," he muttered. But the ships... Proximity alarm blared. Elias's stomach sank as he saw 3 dark ships sliding into view. They moved like predators, slow, confident, ready to strike, bounty hunters, armed and patient. A voice crackled over the Cum's unknown vessel. "Power down and prepare to be boarded. No harm will come to you if you comply." Elias snorted. "That's a lie if I've ever heard one." Lyra's voice shook. "If they take me, they will kill you after." Elias's hands danced over. "The controls, no boarding today," he said. The engines roared to life as he threw the ship into a sharp turn. The bounty hunters followed instantly, lasers flashing past the cockpit windows. The children cried out, clutching their mothers. "Legs, hold on." Elias shouted. He dove toward a nearby asteroid field. Massive rocks spun slowly in the void, their jagged surfaces catching the faint light of a distant sun. It was dangerous. One wrong move could tear the ship apart, but it was his best chance to lose them. The hunters fired again. Blasts exploding against the asteroids around them. Shards of rock tumbled past the ship as Elias weaved through the narrow gaps. The ship's hull groaned under the strain. Lyra held her children tighter, whispering calming words in a language Elias didn't understand. A warning light flashed on the console. The left thruster was overheating. Elias gritted his teeth. He spotted a narrow canyon cut into a massive asteroid ahead, if he could time it right. He might slip through and make the hunters crash or slow down. He pushed the ship harder. The canyon rushed toward them. Walls of jagged rock on either side. The bounty ships closed in, their weapons firing in rapid bursts. A shot grazed the hull, shaking the cabin. The older child whimpered. Elias glanced back. "Almost there," he said, trying to sound calm. They shot into the canyon. The walls so close, Elias could almost touch them. The hunters followed, but the tight space forced them to spread out. Elias made sharp turns, using every scrap of skill he had. One of the hunter ships clipped a wall, spinning out of control before exploding in a burst of fire and debris. To left, Elias grinned grimly. But the victory was short-lived. The other 2 ships were gaining. He needed one more trick, and fast. He spotted a narrow tunnel leading out of the canyon. It was barely wide enough for his ship if the hunters tried to follow too closely. They might get stuck or collide. He aimed for it, the ship's alarms screaming in protest. The tunnel walls scraped the hull as they shot through, sparks flashing past the windows when they burst out into open space. Elias spun the ship hard to the right and cut the engines. The hunters flew past. Missing the turn, they looped around, searching, but Elias had already drifted into the shadow of a massive asteroid. The cold rock hid them from scanners, at least for now. The cabin fell silent, except for the slow breathing of its passengers. Lyra placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You saved us again," she said softly. Elias shook his head. "No. I just bought us a little more time." The truth was, he knew the hunters would keep coming, and the next time, they might not be so lucky. Asterisk, the ship floated in the shadow of the giant asteroid, hidden from the hunter's scanners. Elias kept the lights low, his fingers resting on the controls, ready to move if needed. The silence in the cabin was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the life support system. He could feel the tension in the air, the quiet fear of being hunted. Lyra sat with her children near the small heater, wrapping them in a worn blanket from her bag. The older child, a boy, stared at Elias with wide dark eyes, while the younger, a girl, kept her face buried against her mother's side. Elias caught himself watching them. They looked out of place in his cargo ship, delicate, fragile, and yet somehow strong enough to have survived so much. He stood and walked over, handing them a small packet of ration bars. Not much, he said, but it'll keep you going. Lyra gave a small nod of thanks and split the food between her children. The boy hesitated before taking a bite, still studying Elias as if trying to decide if he could be trusted after they ate. Elias sat across from Lyra. "We can't hide here forever," he said, his voice low. "They'll be back." Lyra's hands tightened around the blanket. "I know. But for now, the children need rest." He leaned back, watching her in the dim light. The silver glow of her skin seemed softer. She looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. He thought about how she had kept her children alive, through war, escape, and now a hunt across the stars. That kind of will didn't come from fear. It came from love. "What's their names?" he asked. She glanced at her children before answering. "The boy is Kale. The girl is Sarah." Kale lifted his head slightly at the mention of his name, but said nothing. Sarah stayed close to her mother, one small hand clutching Lyra's sleeve. "There. Strong kids," Elias said. "They are all I have," Lyra replied, her voice quiet but firm. She looked at him for a long moment. "When I asked you to take me as your wife, I didn't mean it only for the law." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Her gaze didn't waver. "I need someone who will protect them. Not just because of the crystal, but because they deserve a chance to grow up without fear." Elias didn't answer right away. He had never thought about marriage, let alone to someone from another world. He was just a traitor, a man who lived alone among the stars. And yet, as he looked at Lyra and her children, something inside him stirred, a part of him that had been silent for years before he could reply. The ship's sensors gave a faint ping. Elias moved to the cockpit, checking the display. It wasn't the hunters this time. It was a freighter, slow-moving, unarmed, heading toward a nearby mining outpost. An idea began to form. "If we can reach that outpost," he said, "we might be able to resupply. Maybe even throw them off our trail." Lyra joined him in the cockpit. "Is it safe?" "Nothing's safe right now," he replied, "but it's better than sitting here waiting to be found." He powered up the engines, keeping the ship's signature low. As they drifted out from the asteroid's shadow, the stars stretched before them. Lyra placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Elias, if something happens to me, you must take the crystal to the human colonies. Promise me." He met her gaze. "I'm not planning to let anything happen to you," he said. But she didn't smile. She just nodded, as if she had already accepted the danger ahead. The children had fallen asleep by the time the mining outpost came into view. It was small, just a cluster of metal domes clinging to the side of a rocky moon. Lights glowed faintly from within, and a few ships were docked. At the outer platform, Elias guided the ship in slowly. Hoping the hunters weren't watching this sector, they docked without trouble inside the outpost. The air smelled faintly of dust and metal. Miners moved between supply stalls, their faces tired and marked by hard work. Elias kept his hood up, staying close to Lyra and the children as they made their way through. They bought food, water, and a small power cell to replace the damaged one on the ship. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like they were just travelers passing through. But Elias's instincts kept warning him. Places like this were full of ears, and news traveled faster than ships. As they headed back toward the docking bay, a shadow fell across their path. 3 figures stood blocking the way, tall, armored, and with the same red markings Elias had seen on the hunters' ships. Elias' breath caught. Elias stepped. In front of her, "Keep walking," he whispered, but the hunters didn't move. One of them smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Captain Elias, we've been looking for you." The docking bay fell silent. The 3 hunters stood like statues, their dark visors hiding their eyes, the red marks on their armor catching the cold light. Elias felt the weight of their gaze. Even if he couldn't see their faces, Lyra's grip on her children tightened, her body tense like a cornered animal. The lead hunter took a slow step forward. "You've been making things difficult, Captain," he said, his voice low and mechanical through the helmet. Elias kept his own voice steady. "You've got the wrong man." The hunter's laugh was short, sharp, and without humor. "We don't make mistakes. And we know exactly what you're carrying." Lyra's eyes flashed with fear. She stepped closer to Elias, whispering, "They can't have it." No matter what happens, Elias gave the smallest nod, his mind already racing through escape. "Options," the hunter raised a gloved hand. "We can make this simple," he said. "Give us the crystal. And we let you live." Elias tilted his head, and her. The hunter's pause was answer enough. Elias stepped slightly to the side, blocking their view of Lyra as his hand brushed the grip of the small blaster under his jacket. "Here's the thing," Elias said. "I don't deal with liars." The hunter's visor tilted. "That's unfortunate," before the words finished echoing. The nearest hunter moved. Elias drew his blaster and fired, the shot slamming into the man's chest plate, sending him stumbling back. The docking bay exploded into chaos. Lyra pulled her children behind a supply crate as Elias traded shots with the remaining hunters. Bright flashes lit the cold air, the sound of blaster fire ringing off the metal walls. One hunter dropped to a knee, firing at Elias's legs. Elias dove behind a fuel drum, the impact of a shot sending sparks into the air. The lead hunter barked an order in a language Elias didn't understand, but Lyra did. Her eyes widened. "They're calling for backup," she hissed. Elias knew they had seconds, maybe less. "Move!" he shouted. Lyra grabbed the children and sprinted toward the ship, Elias covering them with short, sharp bursts of fire. The remaining hunter lunged forward, but Elias swung a metal crate into his path, sending him crashing to the floor. They made it inside the ship, the docking clamps releasing with a sharp hiss. Elias slammed the launch controls. The engines roared to life, pushing them away from the outpost just as more hunters poured into the docking bay. A shot from below grazed the hull, the ship jolting. Lyra held her children tight, shielding them. With her body, once they were clear of the station, Elias threw the ship into a sharp climb. The stars stretched ahead, the hunters' ships appearing on the scanner almost instantly. "They're not giving up," Elias muttered. Lyra's voice was firm now, almost fierce. "Then it is time you know the truth." Elias glanced at her. "I thought I did." She shook her head. "No, you know part of it. But you don't know why my husband died." She sat across from him, her children curled up against her. "My husband Rovan was not only a soldier," she said. "He was a leader of the resistance. And the crystal? It is not only proof of the Empire's crimes. It is the map to their greatest weapon." Elias's eyes narrowed. "What kind of weapon?" "One that can erase entire cities without leaving a trace," Lyra said, her voice almost shaking. "It is powered by an ancient core, something my people were forced to build. The Empire keeps it hidden, moving it from world to world, always in secret." She leaned forward. "The crystal can find it and destroy it." but only someone outside the Empire's network can activate it. Elias's chest tightened. And let me guess, that's me. Her gaze didn't waver. Yes, humans are not bound to the Empire's biolock systems. You could walk right into their control center with the crystal, and no one could stop you. Elias let out a slow breath. So that's why you begged me to take you as your wife. Lyra's voice softened. At first, it was survival. But now, it is because I believe you are the only one who can finish what my husband started. The hunters closed in on the scanner, their ships moving like shadows through the dark. Elias tightened his grip on the controls. Sounds like I'm in the middle of a war one didn't sign up for. Lyra's eyes met his, steady and unblinking. It's not just my war. It will be yours too, if they win. Elias didn't answer, but deep down, he knew there was no turning back. The moment he took them in, the moment he opened his airlock, his life had changed. And now, he carried something the most dangerous. People in the galaxy wanted. On the scanner, the hunters' ships fanned out, boxing them in. Ilias's mind worked fast. There was only one way out. He turned to Lyra. Strap in. This is going to get ugly. The ship shook as Elias pushed the engines to their limit. The hunter ships stayed on his tail, red lights glowing like the eyes of predators in the dark. He dove toward a cluster of icy moons, weaving through their shadows in a desperate attempt to lose them. For a few minutes, it seemed to work. The scanner showed the hunters splitting apart. Searching the area, Lyra sat strapped into the seat behind him, one hand holding the children close. Her gaze was fixed on the scanner. They won't stop, she said softly. Even if we vanish here, they will keep hunting us across the stars. Elias gritted his teeth. Then we'll make them regret chasing us. He turned sharply toward a small moon with a thin atmosphere. Its surface covered in jagged ridges, a narrow canyon cut through. The middle, the perfect place to hide. He guided the ship down, the hull rattling as they skimmed the surface. Finally, they slid into the shadow of a ridge and powered down. The silence was heavy. Elias was about to tell Lyra they might have a chance to rest when a faint beeping came from the control panel. It wasn't the scanners. It was the ship's internal alert. Someone had sent a signal from inside the vessel. Elias's blood ran cold. His eyes moved to the small communicator on the sidewall. It was still active. Blinking red, he turned sharply toward Lyra. Did you use that? Her eyes widened. No, she said quickly. I've been here with the children. Before Elias could respond, the ship's warning lights flashed bright. A shadow passed over the cockpit window. A massive hunter cruiser was descending. Right on top of them, Elias cursed, starting the engines, but it was too late. A blast from the cruiser's tractor beam locked onto them, pulling the ship upward. The children cried out as the hull groaned under the strain. Elias fought the controls, but the beam was too strong within minutes. The hunters had dragged them into the cruiser's docking bay. Armed soldiers surrounded the ship before the ramp had even lowered. Elias reached for his blaster, but a dozen rifles were aimed at his head the moment he stepped out. Lyra and the children were pulled away from him, the hunters holding them tight. The lead hunter stepped forward, his visor reflecting the cold docking lights. You fought well, Captain, he said, but your ally did not. Elias frowned. What are you talking about? The hunter stepped aside, and a man in a long coat emerged from the shadows, a human, with a thin, sharp face and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Hello, Elias, the man said. It's been a while. Elias's chest tightened. Ren, he said, his voice like steel. Ren shrugged. I told them where to find you. Figured it was better to be on the winning side. Elias's hands clenched into fists. You sold us out. Ren smiled without shame, and for a good price. They want the crystal, not you. I told them you'd hand it over once they had leverage, the lead hunter turned to Elias. "You will give us the crystal now." Elias's jaw tightened. "It's hidden." The hunter's visor tilted slightly. "Then, perhaps the children will tell us where." Lyra's face was pale but defiant. "You touch them, and I will tear this ship apart with my bare hands," she hissed. The hunter's laugh was cold. "We will see." Elias's mind raced. The crystal was still in the lead-lined box on his ship, but if the hunters searched long enough, they would find it. 2 soldiers grabbed his arms. Forcing him to his knees, Ren leaned in close, his voice a whisper. "You should have joined me, old friend. It's easier to survive when you stop pretending to be the hero." Elias looked up at him. "You think surviving is the same as living," he said. Ren's smirk faltered for just a moment. The hunters began to lead Lyra and the children away. Elias's pulse pounded in his ears. He couldn't let them disappear into the cruiser's prison decks. He twisted suddenly, slamming his shoulder into the soldier holding him. The move caught them off guard, and for a split second, Elias had a chance, but the lead hunter moved faster. A stun blast hit Elias square in the chest, sending pain shooting through his body. He collapsed to the floor, the world spinning through the haze. He saw Lyra struggling against her captors, shouting his name. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the sound of the hunters laughing. When Elias woke, he was in a small, cold cell. His wrists were bound with magnetic cuffs. A faint hum came from the walls, a containment field, strong enough to keep even the strongest prisoner from breaking out in the cell opposite. Lyra sat with her children, her face calm but her eyes full of fire. "They will take us to the capital," she said quietly. "Once there, the crystal will be lost forever." Elias leaned back against the wall, his mind already searching for a way out. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet. The cell was cold and dim. Elias sat against the wall, his wrists bound by magnetic cuffs, the faint hum of the containment field in his ears. Across from him, Lyra held her children close, her gaze fixed on the locked door. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet fury. Elias leaned forward, speaking low so the guards couldn't hear. "They're taking us to the capital, right?" Lyra nodded. "Once there, the crystal will be taken to the vault." "No one escapes the vault." Elias's mouth curved into a thin smile. "Then we won't let it get there." Before Lyra could ask how, Elias shifted his hand slightly. The magnetic cuffs sparked once, then clicked open. She stared, surprised. "You could escape this whole time." Elias smirked. "Let's just say, I've been in worse cells." He reached into his boot, pulling out a thin strip of metal, a lockpick he had hidden since boarding the cruiser. Carefully, he worked at the control panel beside the cell. Door. A soft click echoed, and the door slid open with a hiss. The hallway outside was empty except for 2 guards at the far end. Elias moved fast, grabbing one guard and slamming him into the wall before he could shout. The other swung his rifle, but Lyra was already on him. She moved with speed and precision, her elbow catching his jaw, knocking him out cold. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Remind me never to make you angry." She allowed herself the smallest smile. Noted. They armed themselves with the guards' weapons and moved quickly through the narrow corridors. Elias led them toward the docking bay, but an alarm suddenly blared through the ship. "They know we're out," he muttered. The sound of boots thundered behind them. Bounty hunters were closing in fast. They ducked into a maintenance shaft. Moving through the dim, cramped space, the children clung to their mother as they crawled along the narrow metal tunnel. When they emerged near the docking bay, Elias froze. 3 hunters stood between them and the ship, and behind them, Ren's smirk widened when he saw Elias. "Should have stayed in your cell, old friend," he said. Elias tightened his grip on the blaster. "Get out of my way." Ren shook his head slowly. "Not a chance. There's a lot of money on you." And even more on her, Lyra stepped forward, her voice cold. "You sold your own kind to the Empire. You are worse than they are." Ren shrugged. "I prefer to think of it as surviving." Elias didn't waste more words. He fired first. The blast hitting the nearest hunter. Chaos erupted in the bay. Blaster fire lit the air, sparks showering from the walls. Lyra pulled the children behind a cargo crate while Elias fought, moving with sharp, controlled precision, one by one. The hunters fell until only Ren remained. Ren aimed his blaster at Lyra. Elias moved without thinking, stepping into the line of fire. The shot grazed his arm, but he kept moving, tackling Ren to the ground. The two men fought in a flurry of punches and kicks, their boots scraping against the metal floor. Finally, Elias slammed Ren against a wall, pinning him there. "Your problem," Elias said through clenched teeth. "Is that you think winning means selling your soul?" With a final punch, Ren dropped to the floor. Unconscious, Elias turned to Lyra. "Get to the ship." They ran together, the children scrambling up the ramp. Elias powered up the engines, the hum building into a roar. The docking clamps released, and the ship shot out of the cruiser's bay, just as more alarms filled the air. The hunters gave chase immediately, their ships filling the scanner. Elias looked at Lyra. "You said the crystal can find their weapon?" She nodded, pulling it from her bag. "It can. But once we use it, they will know exactly where we are." Elias grinned. "Good. Let's make them come to us." He slid the crystal into the ship's navigation console. The screen lit up with a map, a single glowing point appearing in deep space. "That's it," Lyra said, her voice almost a whisper. Elias pushed the engines to full, heading straight for the point. The hunters followed, just as he hoped, when they reached the coordinates. The sight took his breath away. A massive black-armored station floating like a shadow in the void. "This is their weapon," Lyra said. "If we destroy the core, the station will collapse." Elias armed the ship's weapons and flew straight at the station. The hunters tried to block him, but he weaved through their fire. Lyra took the co-pilot's seat, targeting the weak points marked by the crystal's map. The ship's cannons roared, each blast tearing into the station's armor. A deep rumble shook the void as the station began to crack. Flames burst from its sides, pieces breaking away into space. "Hold on," Elias shouted as the shockwave hit them. The ship spun, alarms screaming. P fought the controls until they steadied. Behind them, the station erupted in a silent explosion. A cloud of fire and debris blooming against the stars. The hunters. Ships scattered, leaderless. Their mission in ruins. Elias exhaled slowly. His arm still bleeding. "That's one problem solved," he said. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "You didn't have to do this." "But you did," Elias shrugged. "Guess I'm not great at walking away." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe. You are the man I hoped you would be." They drifted into the quiet of space, the stars stretching endlessly ahead, but in the darkness, far beyond the scanner's reach, a single ship watched them. Its captain, cloaked in shadow, leaned forward with a smile. "This isn't over," he whispered.